Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is the Grand Chief of Manitoba, Kuwaitanawi Okimakanak, Garrison Settee. Settee has been Grand Chief of the organization that represents the interests of First Nations in northern Manitoba since 2018. He's a former chief of Pimachikamak Cree Nation and has a background in education. MKO was incorporated in 1981 and provides political advocacy for 26 First Nations who are signatories of Treaty 4, 5, 6, and 10. Grand Chief, thanks so much for being with us on the show this week.
It's good to be here.
Lots to talk about, but wanted to start with the recent power outage in Pimachikamak Cree Nation, your home nation.
Absolutely.
Where, as we mentioned in the intro, you were once a band councillor, a chief. You had demanded an urgent meeting with Manitoba Hydro following a press release by the utility that floated a theory that the major power outage may have been caused by someone shooting at hydro infrastructure. Has that meeting happened?
Yes, we've had a meeting last Thursday, as a matter of fact, and we were able to address the issue, and we were able to have a solution going forward as to how the messaging should be conveyed from the corporation, and also so that our people will know that that has been addressed. So I'm glad we had that meeting, and the minister was there, and also the board chair for Manitoba Hydro, as well as the CEO of Hydro. So we had a very good discussion.
Feeling good coming out of that meeting?
Absolutely, absolutely.
How are the people holding up? It's been a traumatic year with wildfire evacuations as well there.
The resilience in our people is very strong, and they have been through a lot. This is the third evacuation in 3 years, so I cannot even imagine the things that they go through on a daily basis, but we see it from the periphery. But I know that our people are strong, and our people being able to undertake this challenge, and they patiently wait for our leadership to be able to mobilize and also plan the repatriation process to the best of their ability. So they're very strong, but I know they'd rather be home.
All right. Pimachikamak Cree Nation, as well as other First Nations in Manitoba, have had a long and often troubled history with Manitoba Hydro. What do you think the impact of the utility has had on the North and the people who call it home?
And I can only speak from where I come from and what we've witnessed. And there is an agreement in place. As you know, the Northern Flood Agreement was signed over 40 years ago. And the people that were anticipating a lot of great things to come out of that are still waiting to see the manifestation of those promises that were detailed in the document. And also, like, the example that I can give you is the eradication of mass poverty and opportunities for employment. Those were very minimal, and they only lasted a short time. And as you probably know, that the unemployment rate is 85% in our First Nation, and also the poverty that we're talking about is still a challenge for many of our people.
Why haven't these promises been lived up to, do you think?
I think a lot of that is political will has not been there, and also the honoring of this agreement has been slow in forthcoming, and different governments have been at the table, but the failure to implement the agreement has been probably the bane of our existence as a Pimachikamak people.
Are you hopeful that any difference could be made now with an Anishinaabe person as our premier? There's an Indigenous person now leading the Hydro board.
I think that there could be opportunities for change, and I think that the political will is there, and I think that we just have to figure out a process that we could both agree on. So I'm very optimistic, and I think that there's a time for change, and I think we're living in a different era, and we have a lot of people that want to see our First Nations thrive and prosper just like any other community in Manitoba. So I think the potential is there.
If the people are going nowhere, and one would suspect the utilities going nowhere, everybody's staying in the north, what do you see as the best way to improve the relationship moving forward?
I think that the opportunities that are lacking for our people when it comes to training and employment and education is certainly a factor. We can fill those gaps, and I think that education will emancipate our people from poverty and will open the door for greater opportunities for the younger people and also the generations that lie before us. And I'm a former teacher, and I truly believe that education will empower our youth to be able to path forward that is better than what they have now.
We mentioned the wildfire evacuations there, which seem to be happening more regularly. Nearly 33,000 people had to flee their homes this past summer, the majority of them from First Nations in northern Manitoba. How would you describe, I guess, the way that the evacuations were handled this past summer?
For me, I felt that coordination could have been done a lot better, and I think that the protocols on how we evacuate First Nations were not there, because I think that there was chaos, and I think that our people were put into situations that they didn't have to be put in, and the registration process is a disaster. And I think that the problem there is because it was not Indigenous led. And anytime you have to deal with our people, you have to be familiar with our culture and our language and also the demographics in which we have to live. If you don't understand that, you can't really effectively coordinate an evacuation. And I think that we should have learned by now, this is not the first evacuation, and hopefully that we don't have to have any more mass evacuations like this. But I always think that, when we've been seeing these things happen for a long time, you'd think we'd figure out a model or a system that would be able to make things easier to do this. But I think that we're still a long way from there, because it's not Indigenous led, and I think that there's a lot of cultural implications on how we do things, and it's simply lacking. So I think that we have to be part of the process. We have to be part of the decision making, and also to have a model that will be conducive to safe transition of our people into urban areas. And one of the things that I live by is if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And that's something that I learned as a teacher. And this is a simple concept, yet profound. If you have a well laid out plan, but if you don't have the resources to be able to execute that plan, then you're still going to put our people through a lot of chaos.
Well, I definitely want to touch on the resources, but I guess a lot of things infrastructure-wise were laid bare when it comes to bridges, roads, having the proper firefighting equipment on hand. Do you think, as the province is reviewing the way things went, that some of those bigger issues might be addressed?
Anytime there's a crisis, you begin to see the gaps. You begin to see the things that are not there that should be there. So what we're doing is reacting. And there's not enough proactive measures to prepare communities for crisis or catastrophes. The infrastructure is simply not there. You have water treatment plants that are not operating in full capacity. You don't have the emergency equipment to be able to address the wildfire. It's simply not ready for a wildfire crisis. So I think there's a lot of investment that needs to be given to our communities, so that when things like that happen, they're ready to fight these fires with equipment on the ground at their disposal, and the training that's needed, without relying on external resources to come in and waiting for firefighters from different countries or different parts of the country to come. We should have a system in place where we have our people trained and be ready to fight the fires when they do occur.
Speaking with your office, it was mentioned that nations are taking things into their own hands when it comes to being prepared for future wildfires, having to use money that may be set aside for other things. Can you speak to some of those efforts?
Yeah, that's one of the unfortunate things, that we have to use our own resources to be able to address the emergency, when that funding should come from the governments to be able to address this as a bona fide emergency. This is a crisis, and it should be treated like a crisis. I don't like the fact that we have to pound on doors to get that resource, to be able to mobilize. It is asinine, and it is unfortunate to think that we can do things without these resources. And that is the most unfortunate part of it, the funding that goes to addressing the catastrophes in First Nations. And then when you see other parts of the country, when there's a crisis, you have all kinds of resources being flooded into those situations, and our First Nations are not treated the same way, and that is most unfortunate.
Yeah, rebuilding whole towns and everything. Grand Chief, much more to talk about here. We just need to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Garrison Settee, the Grand Chief of Manitoba, Kuwaiti, Okimakanak, a political advocacy organization that serves 26 First Nations. Grand Chief, prior to becoming a band councillor or chief or Grand Chief, you were an educator. Why was education the path that you wanted to go down?
I felt that on my journey in life, I needed to do something that was fulfilling, and I feel that I wanted to contribute to my community in some capacity, some fashion. And I started out by volunteering at the school, and then I became a substitute teacher for a while, and I really felt comfortable doing that. It was enjoyable working with the youth. And then I was challenged by the principal, and he told me, "Have you ever thought of becoming a teacher? Because you seem to have a knack for this kind of work." It was the first time I actually thought about it. And then I went on and pursued my education and graduated with a Bachelor of Education degree. And that began my journey with working with our youth. And it's one of those things where you find something you like doing and you get paid for it. Like, it's not too many people that can say that. I never had to drag myself to work, but because I loved what I was doing. And also the most rewarding thing is when you know you're getting through, those moments when you know you're getting through, those are the moments you live for.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it just takes that one person to give you that nudge, eh? How did that, I guess, then lead into politics?
When I was in university, I took a lot of Native Studies courses. I took every Native Studies course in Brandon University, every one of them. And that sort of gave me a perspective on the political landscape for Indigenous people in this country. And it kind of motivated me to dig deeper and finding out more about our treaties and also our Aboriginal rights, and also how colonialism played a part in subjugating our people and the conditions we find ourselves in as Indigenous people in our First Nations, that we've been marginalized and oppressed. I wanted to be able to understand that relationship between the state and our First Nation people, and starting to figure out how can we move forward and empower ourselves from the clutches of poverty and also dependency, codependency. So that part of it motivated me to really get involved in studying about our people and our history. But also I took also other kinds of courses, and I started teaching First Nation history in high school, and that allowed me to start to see things more clearly. And then we piloted a program on First Nation law, and I think that's when I really really got a grasp of what was happening as far as our First Nations concerned, and I started to get a little bit a little bit more vocal and a little bit more involved, engaged, and next thing you know, I was elected chief of my First Nation.
After 20 years in leadership roles, there are days you wish you were back in the classroom?
I still go and teach whenever I have an opportunity. The odd time, if I'm in Thompson or in DePaul, I will phone the school and say, hey, I would like to come and teach a lesson in your classroom, and I still do that, and I like that.
As mentioned, 2 decades in leadership roles. Are there highs and lows that have stuck out for you?
I think one of the things that stands out is whenever there's a crisis such as this one and the ones before, when we're able to support our First Nations in crisis. There are times when there was a crisis in Thompson where a whole apartment building had to be evacuated and people had nowhere to go. Our team was able to step in and provide that support and be able to navigate our people through that and help our First Nations through that. Those are moments that stand out. Even last year, helping all our evacuees, being able to be a part of a solution. Those things stand out, things that you're able to help and that the people that needed that help receive that help. So those things stand out.
Yeah, the mobile MKO's mobile team. I've even heard from friends in Northern Ontario that it has stepped in to help there as well.
You know, our mobile crisis unit is a well-oiled machine. I see them going to communities. It doesn't matter if it's a holiday. It doesn't matter if the weather is not favorable, and if it's on New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve, they still go out there, and I see them. It takes dedication and commitment to be able to do what they do, and they do it well, and they do it from their heart, and I'm very proud of our mobile crisis unit.
Is there some frustration, though, that too little has changed during this time? There's still addiction issues, water issues, housing issues.
The situations when it comes to infrastructure is still there. The amount of resources we have to be able to bring us up to par simply not there, and the social impacts also are getting worse in many aspects because of the opioid crisis that we're facing, because young people are turning to harder drugs to be able to cope with whatever trauma they're going through. It's a coping mechanism, and it's a symptom of something larger. And what I would like to encourage our First Nations to do is go to the root cause of all these problems, because these are symptoms of something larger, and we have to get to the root cause of the problem. And a lot of that is because they're detached from their culture and they're detached from the land. Because I know as a child we used to go out on the land for months, and that would provide a lot of therapy for us. You didn't even know that then, but I know it brings healing to your mind, your soul, your spirit. So they don't have that, and they have gadgets and they have computers, and that's what they have. It's artificial way of dealing with reality, and it's something that is not really helping. So they need to be introduced to their culture, and to also find a place to discover their identity. And those are very critical. The identity of our people is very important, to be proud and to have that self-esteem that is needed to be able to stand up and be able to identify as who you are as a Cree, Anishinaabe, Dene, and be able to move forward with that and finding your place in life and finding what you can do for your people.
Going to touch on that more, Grand Chief. We just have to step aside for one last quick break here, and then we'll continue the conversation on Face to Face. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Garrison Settee, the Grand Chief of Manitoba, Kawaitannawi, Okimakanak, which advocates for 26 First Nations in northern Manitoba. Grand Chief did want to touch on some other things here, including, many people may know that you're also a musician. I wanted to talk to you about a show, though, that you did play at Stony Mountain Penitentiary a few years back, the oldest prison in Canada, just up the road, about 40 minutes from here. Why was that an important gig for you?
One of the things that I wanted to do is, as a Grand Chief, I wanted to make sure that I visited all of our First Nations. So I've traveled to all of our First Nations in my 10 years Grand Chief, sometimes 3 or 4 times. And then I was talking to my staff and I said, there's one area where we have MKO citizens that we have not gone. And those are our correctional institutions. I wanted to reach out to our people there, our relatives, and say that you're not forgotten. And I did go. I took elders with me to have sharing circles and begin to talk with them. And also try to inspire them to think of a new way of thinking when it comes to their personal journeys. Like one of the things I preach is the past does not equal the future. And I heard that somewhere, it's not mine. But it does apply to a lot of our situations as First Nation people. And then while I was there, I talked to the warden and I went into her office. And there was a picture of Johnny Cash at San Quentin in her office. And I said to her, hey, I do happen to play in a band. Would you let our band come and play here? And without batting an eye, she said, sure. So it took a lot of planning and logistics involved. So we went in and played for our relatives in there. And it was a very special time for us because they probably never heard live music in a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And we were able to go in and just reach out because they are our relatives. They're people that made mistakes in life, made the wrong choices in life, but they still matter to us. They still matter to the Creator, so that's what we did, and it's very fulfilling to be able to do something to help out and reach out.
Last week on the show, we had Isabel Daniels on, an advocate for vulnerable and exploited people, and she's turned a lot of her work recently to raising awareness for families of murdered and missing Indigenous men and boys. But she says there needs to be more supports now for Indigenous men while they're alive and while they're struggling with addictions, gang life, generational trauma, the impacts of the child welfare system. Would you agree with that sentiment that more needs to be done now for these people?
I concur with that statement, and I think that culturally, historically, our young men were trained to be warriors. They were trained to protect their societies and provide for their community, not just their family, but the whole community. And that brings self-esteem to one's life. And I think those are a lot of things that are missing in the lives of young people today. They do not have a sense of fulfillment or accomplishment. And as a teacher, I saw that in a lot of our students. So it was incumbent upon me to make sure that I inspire, that I build their self-esteem, and also encourage them to be proud of who they are, and they do have a purpose in life. And that's one of the things that our young people, they don't see hope, because when they see massive unemployment and you see poverty and you see all the struggles we have for addiction, but a lot of people need to see beyond that there's a better way, there's another path forward, and it's empowering our young men to be educated and to be trained and also to be exposed to their culture. I think that's the way forward, to be able to connect with that culture that brings balance and harmony to your life. And that's why they resort to opioids, to be able to try to numb all the pain and the trauma. But there's a better way to do that, and there's a way to move on in life and finding that place where you empower yourself.
Good stuff. Grand Chief, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you taking some time for us and for the work that you do out there.
I'm glad you asked me to come.
Thanks again. Looking forward to our annual meetup at Vision Quest in a
Absolutely.
month or two. That is all the time we have for this week's show. I'm Dennis Ward, Marcy McGuitch. Thanks for being with us. We will see you back here in 7 days.